We focused on economic globalization because it also relates to human rights, social justice, environmental issues, and so it should be a huge priority of the globe to address. And the specific issue I had was human rights. When corporations are unregulated and come into nations, they provide very low wages, which is an inadequate standard of living, which also is a problem that people cannot receive adequate health care. They cannot go to school because they're trying to provide for their families, and they do not have adequate health care. And also, so they face a variety of issues. A solution to this problem that we thought of is to reevaluate the status of corporations, because currently they are treated as people, but they're not upheld to their standards. And so by treating them, by giving them more regulations, they would have more social responsibility for the globe as a whole.
My topic about corporate messing up of the world would be environment, because when corporations aren't regulated, they can pollute streams, they don't have to manage their waste appropriately if the country doesn't have sanctions against them. They have or unregulated resource acquirements, so they can destroy mountains and destroy rainforests, trying to get whatever mineral sources they need for their company. And because they don't have to adhere, because the nations that they fall under don't sign on to international treaties like the Kyoto Treaty, they don't have to follow those regulations, so they don't have to manage their pollution as stringently. A way we came up for a solution for corporate issues would be coming up with incentives for them to actually adhere to things like the Kyoto Treaty or whatever other regulations that governments come up with. And our idea was coming up with a tax where, as corporations infringed on human rights and environment and all the other issues we talked about, they would get taxed more and more and more, so it made it impossible for people to buy their product. Therefore, they couldn't be a successful corporation because they couldn't sell anything. And if they adhere to the sanctions, then the taxes would go down and down and down, their prices would become affordable, and they would get more of a profit because people would be able to buy their goods.
During our group discussion, we really focused on how the economic problems are really the basis for most of the other problems that are going on with social justice and human rights. And we kind of discussed how industry coming into different places really changes cultures and traditions, and in that way you lose a lot of the diversity of the world, as well as just more generally how people are changing their lifestyles, moving into urban areas, and how that standard of living is usually a lot less, even if they are making some kind of income. In the similar ways, in lieu of like social justice issues, when you have lower incomes and kind of this widening gap of inequality, you are creating a lot more chances for human trafficking and general, like they said earlier, like women's rights issues and labor, and this like just general inequality widening gap creates this hierarchy of have and have-nots, and that is where a lot of the problems with inequalities stem from.
We also discussed how, in looking at economic problems, it causes a lot of food insecurity, and that has relationships to a lot of the other problems looking at human security and also the culture. When you upset someone's food supply, you basically are directly impacting their ability to live. So some key aspects that economic globalization has really impacted food supplies is talking about seed ownership and the ability of people to own seed, save seed, and grow their own plants that they would like to grow. A second big problem is agribusiness. Agribusiness has a lot of effects on people. In general, because it takes away the farmer's ability to produce food for themselves and for their family, because the only way to really be profitable is to grow a massive amount of one single crop. And this has a lot of environmental impacts because we deplete the soil and basically take away their ability to switch back to their traditional methods of growing food, even if they wanted to. We also quite frequently encourage them to pollute their land with pesticides and thus really take away their ability to grow food even if they want to go back to the way that things used to be. Another way that it harms is that it leads to people growing cash crops instead of growing a variety of food. And what happens if you have a bad year in your cash crop, you don't have anything to eat. You can't even eat what's left because quite frequently you're growing products that you cannot as a person consume. And so it's really taking away their ability to make profit and support themselves, and really their entire culture that is associated with their food supply, as well as their ability to be independent as people. We discussed some general solutions to problems with corporations, and we believed that a big solution would be for nations to take more of a responsibility. Specifically, developed nations need to sign on to environmental and other international treaties that already exist, that are intended to protect human rights, that are intended to protect the environment. And unless developed nations will sign on and hold themselves to the same standard of the world, we're not likely to see any change in response to economics. In addition, we also need to see a lot more teeth when it comes to applying these policies. We were thinking having it so international courts can try corporations, international courts can hold nations accountable more so than they've been able to in the past, as a way to just promote being responsible.